the CHCH media platform. I'm Bubba O'Neill. Well, as you know, this podcast is a space to highlight the outstanding athletes, coaches, broadcasters, and in this case, maybe a play-by-play guy that hails from Southern Ontario. Today, the spotlight shines on junior hockey, and while one team is one step closer to lifting the Bobby Orr Trophy, or even perhaps the Ross Robertson Cup, the other is making plans for next season. In what was a 2-seed versus a 7, the Barrie Colts got the best of the Niagara Icedogs in 5 hard-fought games. In the clincher on the weekend, Anthony Romani remained a red-hot factor, scoring his 8th goal of the series as the Colts doubled the Icedogs 6-3 in that closing contest. Now, after a first half of the season where Niagara may have been the best team, at least in the East Conference, I'm not sure how to describe the rest of the season. Now, in order to do so, let's bring in the television voice of the Niagara Icedogs, good friend of the show, Steve Clark. Always great to have you, partner.
Great to be here, and I don't know if I'm going to provide answers to all the questions that you have or figure it out. I've actually channeled my grade 13 calculus mindset in terms of trying to figure out what was going on, but I'll do my best because it was a season that had lots of stories.
Yeah, it certainly had all kinds of storylines, some good, some bad, and, you know, first of all, just how you feel right now. I know it's always a very immediate sort of feeling, that sort of end of the season. Yeah. I mean, without sort of getting into everything, because we are going to open up some can of worms. How do you feel? How was the feeling at the end of the series? I know you weren't calling that actual game because it was in Barrie, but thoughts?
So here's the thing. I wasn't calling the games, but family and I, we went up to Barrie for games 2 and game 5. We went up there to watch live because, you know, we became fans again of the Icedogs, and so we decided we wanted to go up and support the team. We felt it was going to be a very competitive series, and you know, so we had that kind of like a little bit of that fan excitement going up to Barrie and watching the team. So yeah, when we were watching Game 5 and watching the seconds tick away, there was a little bit of that empty feeling of the fact that, you know, a team that I call but follow all year round and get to know, you know, the coaches and the players to a certain extent, and you know. With my family, I introduced them to the players too, so they feel kind of part of the team and things like that. So yeah, there was that empty, disappointing feeling when the series ended because I legitimately thought the Icedogs gave the Barrie Colts one heck of a run.
I think that's the feeling around the league. And a couple of people that I have talked to is that Niagara did not lay down to the Colts because the Colts had been playing some good hockey as they ended the regular season. Game 1, a 4-2 loss, and I thought there was pretty much 2 solid periods for the Bulldogs in that Game 1. Game 2 was a 7-5 loss. Now, I remember reading some things on Twitter prior to my 6 o'clock newscast as I'm trying to tee up the contest of the night, and that there was a word that Finn Moffat, who I believe is a goaltender with the Greater Ontario Junior Hockey League's Fort Erie Meteors, he's getting the start over Owen Flores, and I'm thinking to myself, whoa, Game 1 was a 4-2 loss that was pretty tight. I can't fault the goaltender in that. And quite honestly, Owen Flores faces a lot of rubber. He's one of the better goaltenders in the league. What was Ben Boudreau thinking, the head coach here? Then we found out some stuff. You take it from here.
So, you know, again, we were driving up to Barrie and looking forward to a competitive Game 2. And then again, I checked my phone. I get a message from a friend and saying that Finn Moffat was going to get the start. And we're like, what's going on? Is Flores injured? Did something happen? You know, I didn't know anything about what had happened because this had all developed as we were driving up to Barrie. Then we get the word about how there was some shenanigans in a movie theater and all the players were in the movie complex. Not all the players were in the theater, in which there was, you know, I'm going to say disruptions, disturbances, food thrown around, however you want to put it, and those guys all wearing Icedog jackets associated with the Icedogs. Then we find out that the consequences are that the player has to sit at least 1 period in the series, and you're thinking, this is completely unprecedented. So Ben Boudreau decided to try and get it all out of the way as much as he could in Game 2, kind of took a deep breath, and really, you know, what period are you going to sit Owen Flores in, right? How can you predict what period to sit in? So we went with the first period, and listen, Finn Moffat played well. He made some good saves, but I mean, these Barrie guys, legitimate NHL prospects and shooters and things like that, and they got a 3-1 lead after one period, 5-1 after 2 period, and then the Ice Dogs come back to tie it at 5, and you're thinking, is this really going to happen? And then, Anthony Romani, who is the Ice Dog killer, by the way, scored the game winner in an empty net. But it is the most bizarre set of circumstances. And I've been involved in the Ontario Hockey League now for 17 years. I've never seen a consequence like that. I've never seen players have to sit throughout a series for a period. And it was unbelievable. And some of the people I talked to were puzzled at the consequence. You want to consequence players, that's fine. But why not do it with a community service, a fine to the team, and don't do this lineup shuffling stuff, because that really, to me, it takes the integrity of the game into question.
And this is what I have to ask you here, because first of all, was this a team discipline, or was this something that was inflicted by the Ontario Hockey League?
I heard it was league driven, and you can take that for however it is. I know that this happened before game 1. And so there was lots of back and forth and discussion between all of the parties that were involved, the league, the team, and things like that. And so I honestly don't know if this was like a total league, this is our final decision, or whether or not this is an Ice Dog decision, or whether or not both sides had input in, but obviously the league has the final say. So I understand league-driven is the term, and you can interpret that however you want. But I would say it leaned more on the league, that they really wanted to punish the players involved.
Well, so obviously the Ice Dogs tried to get in front of it and say, look, we're going to do this. We're going to try this. Will this work in terms of the OHL? And I guess the OHL agreed to it. It does put the team at a very, very precarious situation. You talk about it. This is where Finn Moffitt, starting the first game in his Ontario Hockey League career, is a playoff game on the road in Barrie. This is crazy. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, too. I don't think Kevin He played the first period as well, too.
No Kevin He, no Ryan Robrek, a couple of other key players, Flores, obviously,
right.
Alex Asadorian. The three of the key players for the Ice Dogs did not play in the first period at all.
Wow. That just, I don't know how the coaches figured that out. And I guess that get in front of it right away with your best players right away in game 2 as opposed to game 4. Boy, an interesting situation, but I do have to kind of go there too, in the sense that what were the players thinking here? And I know you weren't there. This is a I guess kids are going to be kids.
Yeah, man. I'm a high school teacher as well, and so teenagers are going to act out in some way, whether it's irrationally or whether it's just teenagers being teenagers. But I mean, these guys have a responsibility. They're wearing the logo in the community, and that responsibility,
and they were that night,
is, yes, from what I understood,
yes,
is that you have to behave. You have to be on your best. You have to be on your best behavior, even more so knowing that the league is looking very, very closely at your operations, both on the ice and off the ice. Like, the organization top to bottom is being looked at right now by an outside legal firm, as well as the Ontario Hockey League.
So these are two separate things that are going on right now.
Yes.
Okay.
So when you see something like this and you're like, I can look at it this way, right? Because, as a paying customer going up to Barrie, and if I was a paying customer in Barrie, I wasn't in a real good mood to find out that I wasn't going to see the starting goalie, Owen Flores, and I wasn't going to see the best players possibly for the whole game. So there was that to consider. And then there was the whole bizarre league discipline issue and how it looks on the team. And I don't want to bash the league here. The league really is in an extremely difficult position because you have to have consequences. You have to, right? If it's public, if it's reported to the league and you find out what happened, you have to have consequences. How they consequenced and the decisions that they made, I think that can be up to question. I know there were some people with the organization and that who weren't overly thrilled with the fact that it kind of played a little bit with the game in game 2 and put the Ice Dogs already down 1-0 in a really, really difficult position.
So you're back to St. Catharines and, oh, wow. Kevin He is alive. The Bulldogs Ice Dogs are flying up and down the ice, and they pull out, I think, a 6-4 victory. They looked really good in that game.
I said to Ed Burkholder after the game, I said, that was fun. That was how I remembered it. And the one thing with this team, is there has been no quit. their intestinal fortitude can never, ever be questioned, because what they've dealt with on and off the ice with losing streaks and things going on away from the rink, I mean, that's hard for anybody as a professional to deal with. Now you're dealing with kids who are 16 to 20 who are trying to further their career and deal with this. Man, I thought like that bounce back performance by Niagara was fantastic. Kevin He did exactly what a captain should do. The big guns showed up. Asadorian, 2 goals. Robrick had a goal. Flores was outstanding. And it was a smallish crowd by playoff standards for Niagara, just a little over 3,000. But man, they did generate a lot of noise. And you started to think, well, they played well in game 1. They could have stolen game 2, even though a lot of things were stacked against them. Now they've won game 3. Why not the Icedogs? And that was kind of the feeling after game 3.
Because in game 4, the crowd responded with a much larger crowd.
Yeah, over 40, I think almost 4,100. So when you that shows you the Niagara fans and how excited they are about playoff hockey. You're a 7 seed and you get back into a series 2-1, and then 1,000 more people are coming through the gates, generating that much more noise. That's a pretty special fan base, and they almost got rewarded. I think you sent me a text that night, what the heck happened, or something like that, or how did they blow it, or something. And it was just one of those things in which you're up 3-2. They took a marginal late penalty, and it was just one of those little chintzy hooks. And then Tristan Bertucci scored with 20 seconds to go to tie the game. That swung the momentum to Barrie's favor, and Barrie decided, okay, we need to start putting this team away or else we're going to find ourselves in trouble.
Yeah, that third period was all Barrie, and it at least seemed like Niagara could just, no matter what they did, they could not respond, could not get out of their own zone, which I thought was something that was very, very apparent to me. Just before we kind of finish off the rest of the series here, so I think it's fair to say, first of all, that because this was the first time Niagara had been in the postseason in, 2019?
Yep.
Niagara still care about junior hockey. Like, this isn't an issue here where, they're not ready to support their team. Niagara have had some outstanding playoff runs previous to that. We do know that.
Yeah.
So I think in Niagara, this Niagara area, the St. Catharines area, they're just waiting for this team to be really good.
Yeah. I mean, before the pandemic, if you go back to 2015, 2016, this team went championship and then they got swept by London. Next year, rebuilding, swept by Peterborough. The year after, they won a round, lost to the Bulldogs, who were the eventual OHL champions. And then the year after that, got upset by Oshawa 4-2 in the second round. A lot of sellout crowds. Then you have the pandemic. Then you have the transition from the Burke ownership, which we know ended not quite as well in a little bit some difficult circumstances. Then you transition to Darren Doppelaar, and there's been a number of things that have happened there. But the fan base has hung with it. The crowds are down. There's no doubt about it. But second half of the season, there was definitely, an uptick in crowds. There were a couple of sellouts, especially when the London Knights came to town. There was a complete sellout, and you could see the increase in the playoffs. They love junior hockey in Niagara. Everybody loves the Meridian Center. And they want to see this team succeed. They're begging for this team to succeed because they want to get back to those days in which they were making the playoffs and selling out the building. And it could happen. Those things could happen.
So when you look at the series now, which they lose in 5, was this a situation where just the better team won?
I think in the end, the better team won. I mean, Barrie has a number of NHL draft picks. They have the one line. I don't know how Marty Williamson pulled this off. This is like
former Bulldogs, Icedogs coach.
Yes, former Icedogs coach who took him to both their championship appearances. This was like Brian Burke getting both the Sedin brothers, in terms of what he did. Able to acquire a whole line. Anthony Romani, Owen Van Steensel, Dallin Wakely. 3 straight Final Four appearances for North Bay. They're playoff tested. They're outstanding. And they scored over half the goals in the series against Niagara. Romani scored in every single game. He scored in every single game that they played against Niagara, regular season and playoffs. So that line dominated. And then you've got depth you've got Cole Baudouin, who is a first-round pick of Utah. You've got Emil Hemming, who's a pick of Dallas. Kayshawn Aitchison, who obliterated Ivan Gallianoff in game 2 with an open ice hit. Going to be a first-round draft pick this year. One of my favorite players in the draft. Goes on and on with the depth. So, yeah, I think in the end, the better team won. But Niagara resembled more the team in the first half than they did in the second half. But Barrie, I mean, they could score. They could score at will. And in every single regular season game against Niagara, they scored at least 5 goals. And they did that again in the playoffs, except the one game the Icedogs won 6-4. So, yeah, in the end, depth, I would say, overwhelmed. But even that game 5-0 going into the third period.
Yeah.
Icedogs pull it back to 5-3. And Barrie, I'd say they were a little bit nervous until finally they kind of, righted the ship and won in the end.
So it's so hard for me, and I said this in the opening there, to describe what this season really was for the Icedogs. Was it a successful season? It's a successful growth. I know broadcasters like yourself, when everyone's shaking hands and they say, the Icedogs have nothing to hold to hang their heads about. Right? And this well could be true. You look at the Icedogs season, and it's so confusing to me. They win 9 of 11 to start the season.
Yep.
And everyone's talking about, wow, the Icedogs are back. They're looking good in December. They win, I believe, 7 of 8. And then there's this 12-game losing skid through February and March. And they went from being top tier to wondering if they're going to make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you describe this type of season. And there were some things that they look so good at it. Mm-hmm. Talk about scoring. Yeah. And then it looked like they couldn't keep the puck out of their own net. And I'm not going to lay the blame all on the goaltender, too. Defense looked weak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you've hit on a number of salient points there, Bubba, because, before the season, I think I sat here on this couch and I said the Icedogs were a playoff team, lower tier, probably 6 to 8, I said, which turned out to be exactly right. The method in which they got there, though, obviously you can't ever predict that with a team that was going so well, over 20 wins with that 7-game winning streak, as they hit the Christmas break. Then they had a couple games in which they lost, but no big deal. We were all kind of waiting to see if things were going to fall apart, just because the team was kind of picked to be a middle-of-the-pack team. But then they were able to, again, pull the nose up and start winning games again. And then it started innocently enough. It started with 2 games, Barrie on a Saturday, North Bay on a Sunday. Lost in overtime to Barrie, lost in a shootout to North Bay. And you're thinking, okay, they'd won the game before against Erie, so that's points in 3 straight games. And you're thinking positive. And then the losses just started piling up. Owen Flores got injured halfway through. I would argue the goaltending to a certain extent got hung out to dry. You'd lost your second goalie, Charlie Robertson, for the season as well. So now you're down to your 16-year-old rookie. Matt Humphreys is going to be a good goalie in this league.
Not yet.
But you put him in this type of situation with a defense that's struggling, with a team that's struggling. Man, that's tough for a 16-year-old, and he has all the attributes to be a good goalie. But I know, being a goalie dad, that the mental part of the game matters as well. So hopefully his mental frame is right. I mean, they were chanting his name. We want Humphreys in Game 5. That's tough for a 16-year-old kid to have. And to which I wanted to respond. Icedogs scored 3 straight. You might want to start Barrie chanting for your own backup goalie because things are going so well. But yeah, and then I think with off-ice distractions, and Ben Boudreau himself said Owen Flores masks a lot of the flaws that we have on this team. And I think when he went out injured, those flaws become a little bit more pronounced. Off-ice stuff is happening as well as we were learning. And yeah, it was that 12-game losing streak. Ironically, they ended up winning against London, the best team in the league, in one of the probably one of the best nights you could have at the Meridian Center.
I watched that game and heard your call. You would not be faulted for not believing what you're seeing.
Yeah.
I didn't think London took the night off.
No.
The Icedogs were flying.
Yep.
And that's certainly something to hang your hat on, as they say, and say, hey, there is something here. Let's bring up a board here, Laura. 3 players that I think I kind of where they go from here. Your thoughts about these three players?
Well, you see the goal totals there, right? Providing probably, I would say, doing some rough math, roughly 35 to 40% of the goals. Kevin He, we've heard his story, right? First Chinese-born player signed, NHL contract, Winnipeg, a number of steals they had in the draft. He is one of them. He's back next year. He's only 19. He's playing junior hockey next year. Ryan Robrick, unbelievably, with those numbers, is not draft eligible until next year. The Hockey News had him at second in a way too early draft. And if you take meet Ryan Robrick, the person, and Ryan Robrick's family. His older brother Dylan is in the Rangers farm system playing for the American Hockey League. And this is a young man mature beyond his years. I think somebody who recognizes that he could have something special happening next year and wants to just focus on hockey because he's a gentleman off the ice and one of the most skilled players I've seen on the ice. And Andre Loshko was an import waiver pickup, waived through the queue last year, kind of fell into the Ice Dogs' laps. He's a Seattle Kraken draft pick, 4th round in 2023, 116th overall, not signed yet. I would expect that to change with the season that he had. He had 16 power play goals, and he killed penalties. He's a great face-off man. So I think there are different levels and different reasons. There's bright futures for all three of those.
All three of those guys. And again, I think the most promising thing is that Niagara Icedog fans are going to see the majority of those guys back.
Yeah, Loshko moves on. He's an overager. But the foundation of the Ice Dogs, the core, with those two players leading the way, and they've got Ethan Zada, who was picked. He was in the 50s, I think, high 50s in a couple of the draft outlooks have. So they've got him in the 2nd, 3rd round, maybe. You add a couple of other players. Brady Wasslin is another player that they're looking at in the 1st round next year. He was the pick 4th overall. Max Crete, 2nd round pick. Blake Aerosmith, a young man they got from London, is only 17 years old. The foundation is there for a very, very strong team. But the Ice Dogs have to be very, very careful and very, very smart in the offseason because they do have some holes to fill, defense, and they do have to really, I think they do have to really fortify the goaltending now. And to try and find somebody of Owen Flores' caliber is going to be awfully difficult, but they're going to have to really strengthen the goaltending.
The organization itself, Boudreau as a head coach, your thoughts?
You know what? Listen, I like Ben Boudreau. He is an engaging fellow. He's a little bit of a quirky guy, and I mean that in a good way. I think he had a good handle on his team. I do think, he had coached in the ECHL, and it's very difficult dealing with grown men as it is dealing with teenagers, 16 to 20. And I think that was a little bit of a learning curve for him to navigate. But all the players, from my perspective, seem to really respect him as a coach. Obviously, the pedigree is there. Bruce was around a few times, but not like a presence as if to say, oh, there's Ben's dad is here, like that type of thing. Listen, he's still a young coach, and I know, again, I can sit there. We can sit there an armchair quarterback, but I did think, you shorten your bench in the postseason, maybe to have strength in the 3rd period. But I think he did shorten the bench a little too much at times during that series because you could tell fatigue was a part of things for the Ice Dogs. But on the whole, he did a great job. He had Dan Paillet, well-established NHLer as an assistant coach. Mark Slauson, somebody who'd had a great reputation in major midget and throughout some of the other ranks of junior hockey. The coaching staff, I think, was very, very strong, and I really, really hope they're all back. Adam Monroe, as the goalie coach, I think did an outstanding job as well. I really hope that they're all back.
Let's have a look at what's going to happen in the Ontario Hockey League. Now we're down to the conference semifinals. And I thought, really, everything happened which was supposed to happen, I think. I don't think it was like a major upset or anything. Now, I mean, I think everything ended in 5 except Oshawa, I think, got pushed to 6.
Yes.
Other than that, but your thoughts on these East matchups?
Well, for I got to get it out of the way because I did another podcast, and my prediction for Kingston Sudbury was Sudbury in 7, and that went horribly wrong with Kingston sweeping. So maybe I'm the person sitting on the couch, so I guess I will answer the question. I hope Oshawa and Brantford lives up to the hype that Oshawa and Brampton did, because to me the Oshawa-Brampton series was a little bit disappointing. I think the Brampton Steelheads looked like they were a team peaking for the playoffs, and they just never found their game in the playoffs. And I actually think that 4-2 series win for Oshawa was a little flattering to Brampton, because they went 0-3 at home. And then, struggled at times in the Oshawa series with discipline and special teams and things like that. Brantford, they got pushed by North Bay. They did get pushed. Game 2 was a bit of a snooze fest. It was 0-0 going into the third, and the Bulldogs won 3-0 with a couple empty netters. Then they won Game 3 in overtime, and that was big. But North Bay bounced back in Game 4 before Brantford took control. So actually, that series definitely went as expected. I didn't think North Bay was your typical 8 seed, because they still had some players left over from those 3 playoff runs, and they had some young, hungry guys who were looking to really make a name. And that's a good series for Brantford to have, a good test to have in the first round. I said before, kind of when I predicted the playoffs, whoever won the 4-5 matchup was going to win the conference. And so I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to say Oshawa wins in 6 or 7 really, really hard-fought games.
Upset.
And I sit there, and I look at that high-end talent that Brantford has, and the coaching of Jay McKee. But then I look at that high-end talent of Oshawa, and they've been there before, and they don't want to have their run end short of what they got to last year. Because I think that OHL Final 4 game blowout against London left a sour taste in Oshawa's mouth. So I think they're kind of locked, loaded, and ready. So I got to stay consistent, and I have to say it's in 6 or 7, it's going to be Oshawa.
Kingston. I mean, it was only until the very end of the Bulldogs season, where they needed a victory to clinch the division, that I realized that Kingston had this unbelievable second half of the, basically didn't lose a game at home in the second half of the season. Kingston are peaking. They are playing good hockey. They are very talented.
They are. And, I had a chance to go call a Kingston game, couple Kingston games, one up in Sarnia when I went up to Sarnia to fill in for the weekend. And I just looked at this team and I thought, wow, this team has that look about them as eyeing bigger prizes down the road. They're a veteran team. They added at the trade deadline. Joey Willis was a huge add for them on forward from Saginaw, who won the Mem Cup, of course, last year. Cedric Gandon is an overager who is nothing but class and just an outstanding player. He played every single OHL game in his career until like the second or third last one. I think he missed due to illness. So they've got Jacob Battaglia. I thought their goaltending was a little bit questionable. And then they got Charlie Schenkel from the Sioux, and he was a little bit inconsistent after he got to Kingston, winning games but not necessarily playing well. Looked very good against Sudbury. So yeah, Kingston is one of those kind of cursed franchises that just seems to not work out for them. It's a little bit of a different mindset. And having watched the Barrie Colts, to me, be very inconsistent for 5 games, give up a lot of goals, give up a lot of third-period goals. They gave up 10 third-period goals in the series to Niagara. They need to really get on top of things and really kind of improve their consistency and get scoring from more than one line, or else they're going to find themselves out against Kingston. And I'm going to say Kingston in 6 in that one.
Okay, let's have a look at the West. And I know there's some people out there, and I've talked to that just said it's London or nothing. And as much as I look at those 55 wins, I'm like, oh my goodness, 55, 11-2. I still think that Kitchener, can beat London. But first of all, we've got to get to the semifinal action first. Does Erie have a chance?
They have a chance to push London. And Erie, to me, I mean, they're a feel-good story this year, right? They lose their coach, Stan Butler.
That's
right? Their owner passed away, Jim Waters, and that was quite suddenly. They had interim coaches. They bring in Chris Millette towards the end of the season. And a lot of people, and I'll include myself, didn't give them a whole lot of chance against Saginaw because Saginaw had a ton of offense. But Erie, they couldn't stop scoring. They just kept scoring. And, the big guns for Erie, ex-Icedogs Pano Fimis, had 8 points in the first 2 games, including 5 goals. Martin Misiak, a Blackhawks draft pick, had 2 hat tricks in the series.
Wow.
Anthony Sam Alfano, local. I believe he's Niagara region or Caledonia. I can't remember, but he's local. Overager had a big series, and then one of my favorite players, Malcolm Spence, 200-foot player, first rounder in the NHL this year, guaranteed, had a strong series, and they got enough goaltending from Noah Erliden. Can they push London? Yes. London, though, they simply overwhelmed Owen Sound. Owen Sound could hang with them for a period or so, but it's too much depth, too much London,
players.
too much Dale Hunter, and too much talent. And
how do they end up with all these players?
Well, listen, they draft and they develop. And they've become a destination spot for a lot of players, too. And a lot of people will, maybe not report or not be as willing to report to a team and say, I only want to be drafted by London, or I want to sign with London, and things like that. And can you blame them? They put over 9,000 in the building, sell out pretty well all season long. You've got a bona fide Hall of Famer in Dale Hunter as the head coach and the co-owner. And, the talent...
1,000 wins now, I think it is.
Yeah. And you have a defense that has Sam Dickinson, first-rounder San Jose, Oliver Bonk, first-rounder Philadelphia. It just goes on and on. And they have a goalie who they picked up, an overager from the Western Hockey League, who has 1 loss this year.
I know, 1 loss.
Austin Elliott, 1 loss. So, I think 5. I'm going to give Erie a game, 5. London and Erie do not like each other at all. The franchises do not like each other. It doesn't matter if the players don't play. It's simply 2 teams who do not like each other. It's going to be a feisty series.
Kitchener and Windsor. I like this series.
I like this series a lot, too, because it's a clash of styles. It's Windsor with all of that offensive firepower. Ilya Protas, a 50-goal scorer. Liam Greentree had 49, would have had 50 if he didn't get suspended at the end of the year. Anthony Cristoforo, I think, is about a plus 100, it seems like, this year. Ethan Belchez, the first pick overall. A lot of offense. Windsor, who might be a year early. Can you believe that? They might be a year early. Same thing with Kitchener. Neither one of these teams were expected to be this good this soon. Kitchener just has that lockdown structure system. They're a sum of their parts team. They've got outstanding goaltending in Jackson Parsons. Their coaching is second to none. Jussi Hokas from their Finnish head coach is really not long for the Ontario Hockey League, I would say.
Wow. Even
though he's just signed to a new contract. Real clash of styles. I said to myself, out of the big 3 in the Western Conference, that Windsor was the most vulnerable. So I'm going to stick with that and say Kitchener in 7. And it's going to be I think it's still going to be a very, very close series. I just think that Kitchener's goaltending is just a little bit better, and their defense structure is just a little tiny bit better. It'll be a great series, though.
I think so. Fair to say, when you look at the overview of everything, is this London's to lose?
Yes, it is. It really is. This is a team that blew through the playoffs last year. I think they lost 1 game. And then it was the most one-sided OHL final that you could have. The only game that Oshawa came close in was a game in which they had a 6-2 lead after 2 periods and blew it and lost 7-6 in overtime. It's London's to lose. You rang off the stats, the 55 wins, the 11 losses. They scored the most goals. They gave up the least amount of goals. They had the best home record. They probably had the best road record. They've got everything, and it's going to be up to one of those teams to try and stop London and to try and beat them 4 times in 7 games when they've only lost 11 games all year. It's a very, very hard task. But, it's kind of fun to see if somebody can knock off the Giants. And whether it's Kitchener or Windsor, both those teams have beaten London this year. Either way, it would be a whale of a series if it turns out to be one of those teams against London. But they're just far and ahead the favorite right now.
Well, I always remember at this point of the season, going back, I think it was 2018. I can't remember the year. 2018, when the Bulldogs faced a team from Sault Ste. Marie, who were in the similar situation, giant killers. I think they won 60 games.
Yep.
They were unreal, and the Bulldogs took care of them in 6. And in that Game 6 final, in front of 14,000 or whatever it was, 13,000 at Old Cops Coliseum on national TV. I always remember that anything can happen in these kind of OHL playoffs because I think we often forget they are kids.
Yeah, I was there. I was there for that game. Yeah. And I remember, you know what the key thing is for any team playing London? Try and steal one in London. Split the first two games. Because that's what the Bulldogs did in that series. They beat Sault Ste. Marie in game one, and so they split and took home ice advantage back and were able to kind of nurse that the rest of the way. So there you go. I know it's groundbreaking advice, isn't it? Steal one on the road and get home ice advantage. That's the quality content you came for, right?
That's exactly. No, but I mean, you got to say it, though. It is truth. It is truth, all right? So anyway, I think the Ontario Hockey League, I've said this all the time, like, we look at other leagues that are coming up, and the NCAA is such a better product than it's been. And we've got the U.S. League as well too, where some players are really developing. Europe will always be Europe, but the Ontario Hockey League, CHL product, but I think of the OHL in particular, just it's outstanding. Obviously, a great place for players to come up.
Yep.
But the level of play, I think, is so high, and that for the most part, it's very even play. And I think it's the best place for young junior hockey players to certainly come up and obviously, hopefully be drafted.
Yeah. I mean, pro style schedule, right? 68 games played during the regular season. All of the draft and development tools that you could ask for. And I mean, this year in the upcoming, Ontario Hockey League draft, I mean, a guy who was injured for over half the year, Matthew Schaefer, is still the odds-on favorite to be the first pick overall. I think there was like 5 out of the top 10 picks projected are OHL, and something like 9 in the whole first round are projected to be OHL players. It's a great year for the Ontario Hockey League and a great year at a really, really important time and a critical juncture in junior hockey, as with all those teams with the USHL and the NCAA, they're all kind of meeting together, and players are given a lot more latitude in terms of where they want to have their best development. And call me a league shill or call me a league, spokesperson, but I truly believe that the Ontario Hockey League and the CHL is the best place to develop if you want to become a professional hockey player.
Steve, professional broadcaster you are, and you always do a wonderful job and so insightful with your knowledge. And I'm great to have you. And I know you represent the other dog, the other dog. But it's great to see the Ice Dogs back, and certainly hearing your calls. And it was a tough situation in the postseason, but good to hear, especially from what you said there, that hockey is still alive and well in St. Catharines and Niagara. Certainly look forward. Enjoy your off season.
I will. Yeah, I only have one thing booked in the next few months. So yeah, it is truly an off season.
Well, you're generally a very, very busy man, and mix in your wonderful daughter, who's going to be a backstopper in the PWHL one day. Hey, congratulations! Enjoy your time off, but we do look forward to the season starting again.
Absolutely, for sure, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the playoffs. Now I get to be a fan, so I might go out and watch a few games live and see what's out there.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
That's a Sportsline podcast for the day, and you've just seen and heard. We love talking local sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote the Sportsline podcast, we want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. If you have something to say, always appreciate your comments. For the outstanding people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you so very much. We're talking golf, the Masters tomorrow.